So I have provided a few examples of successfully built time machines. And yesterday I provided an example of a few examples of what I consider to be failed space-time travel machines. And I argued yesterday in the piece that I created that my failure as a performance artist in a piece that I performed in 1969 was the result of a response to my audience that was based in an injured ego. And I suggested by analogy that that recent space travel ventures made by a few or a couple of billionaires seem to fail for the same reason. And I suggested that particularly in this time, in this political climate, there's a good reason to take care not to fail, particularly where masses and masses of resources are being utilized. And one of the central wheels in the discussion that I provided yesterday was that actions performed from a point of view in which the ego investment is too great seem to get in the way of space-time travel successes. And I think the reason for that is because there's a certain amount of flow that that one has to participate in order to successfully space-time travel. And this flow is a result of, at least in my experience, the coordination of, say, loci or points in space-time. So a point in space-time can be constructed out of any set of data, and it can be connected with another point in space-time that's constructed out of any other set of data. And I've given some examples of how to generate those types of data sets, and I've provided some examples of the way that a persistence in processing the results of those transportations as data sets can lead to extended space-time voyages. And then this recursive semiotic familiarity, in which once you reach a destination, then you explore the terms that brought you to that destination, and the terms that are relevant in the particular space-time locus that you began with. So, we basically went through that with, specifically with the space-time adventures that led us to Jimi Hendrix's performance of the Star-Spangled Banner at Woodstock. And what I want to do today is I want to take a look at the construct of ego as a point in space-time, rather than as, say, a psychological field in which the subject has an invested self-interest in its survival, proliferation, expansion. Rather than seeing the sight of I, the self, as sort of this informed psychological space in which I is antagonistic to other, I want to look at this site as simply a locus in space-time. And the data set that I'm going to use for that particular conception of ego and self is going to be, in this example, simply my name. What we're looking at is my image as it is reflected on my computer screen, in an image in which I'm photographing a picture of Rocket Robin Hood, who became an element in the space-time travel investigation that we did yesterday. So I'm going to use my name, and my name can be configured in a number of different ways, depending on who is remembering or transcribing it, or what name I'm using to refer to myself. So in publications of my work, I've been referred to as, generally I've been referred to either as Bruce Stater or Bruce Slater. And for some reason, it's hard for certain publishers to get the name right. It doesn't seem like it's a very complicated name, but publishers seem to have a problem with it. And I had one publisher who wrote me a letter or an email following publication of a couple of pieces in a magazine called Off Course, and he said, if there's anything that's incorrect, let me know. And so I responded immediately, and I said, yes, you spelled my name wrong. And then it just remained that way. I don't really understand why. It was pretty clear that I do know how to spell my name. But anyway, so those two options are there, and there are some other ways to identify me, but I'm not going to use those today. The identifier today is going to be Bruce Stater. Bruce is my middle name, and Stater is in some way my last name, although it was my father's name, and I never knew my father, so it's weird, to have a name from someone that you never met, but it doesn't bother me in any way, so I'm going to use that. This discussion about names, though, as a space-time locus, what I'm doing in a certain way is I'm problematizing my name because I want my audience to understand that any space-time coordinate is always provisional, right? There's always another way, either like to create the data set, to either specify a different referential vector of the positionality, or to further specify the circumference of the positionality to either expand or reduce the circumference of the field, so that if, for example, like if I say Earth, then your destination is planet Earth. But if I say Round Rock, Arizona, it's quite a bit more specific. And then within Round Rock, I can give you other, there are other means, longitude and latitude, to identify, and because longitude and latitude, is a coordinate system based upon the Cartesian plane and this, XY axis, then, potentially, regarding the surface of the Earth, which is a two-dimensional construct, even though it's three-dimensional space. Well, I can talk more about that, but generally, unless your space-time coordinate, for example, is the Empire State Building, you could easily get lost there. But generally, if I give you a longitude and latitude on a two-dimensional surface, you can find a location, right? So because numbers exist the way that they do, and the surface of the Earth is relatively flat, other than if you're in the Himalayas, or if your destination is the Empire State Building, then we can say that you could use you can use fractions of those numerals represented in decimal point, and come infinitely close to a location. So if I say Earth, you get to Earth. If I say Round Rock, you get to Round Rock. If I give you longitude and latitude, you can get to just about exactly where I am. And then if I added another coordinate, say that there was an XYZ coordinate for longitude and latitude. So you call it longitude, latitude, and what we'll call the other one, zaptitude. Let's call it zaptitude. And your zaptitude would give you the location in three-dimensional space. And so say that the longitude and latitude gave you the coordinate of the Empire State Building, then the zaptitude would tell you what floor you were on. And we don't have that measurement term, but we might be able to create that measurement term, right? So anyway, a name can do exactly the same thing. And I've only given examples in three-dimensional space, but because we're dealing with space-time travel, in addition to zaptitude, I can have word for time, chronitude. I can have chronitude coordinates and time, because it also exists in dimensionalities, right? So talking about time, there's sometimes people are limited in their understanding of time to forward and back. So they would conceive of like the past, and then that's a linear conception of time that leads to the present, and then the future, one imagines extending this line further from that trajectory, that vector that begins in the past and goes into the present. But time is also concentric circles, right? So I can take a segment of any clip that I make, any video that I make, or any film that I make. I can change my relationship to time by taking any second and expanding it into any other segment of time. I can reduce it, or I can expand it. So say that I have one of the seconds of forever, and I take that second of forever, and I'm within that second. I isolate the second, and I isolate it in a specific space moment. Say that it's on the computer screen. This is a moment, right? And I take this second. This is less than a second, but I can take any second, and then I can extend the time of that second. So whatever was going on in that second is now going on for 10 seconds, or a minute, or an hour, or 2 hours, and that's another way of conceptualizing time. So that's another dimension of time that is, you could say, if you wanted to make it linear, although I don't know why you would, if you wanted to convert it into a Cartesian plane, you could say that the first axis is this line that runs horizontally from the past into the future, and you could say that the second line is any line that begins in the present and explores that time by extending whatever moment that is in a line that doesn't run horizontally or vertically, but rather on the z-axis, right? So a kind of moment in which t0 becomes potentially infinite, or a coordinate that can be converted into eternity. So that's another dimension, and then there are other dimensions as well, and then those dimensions are best understood in terms of coordinating points and hyperlinks and other ways of moving through time. and some of the metaphors that can be used to describe those dimensions of time are memory and association and things like that. So, time has different dimensions, and space has multiple dimensions, and so it makes sense that the ego, can be utilized in different ways as well, and the name, which is going to stand in for the ego in this case, is multivalent and multidimensional, and but we're going to limit the name that designates I in this particular performance, and we're going to limit it to Bruce Stater, and I'm going to use the same space-time travel field that I've used before. I'm going to begin with a site in which a few examples of both my poetry and my discursive writing are presented, and I'm going to use as one of the loci the name Bruce Stater, which is on a set of data on the right side of the page, and I'm going to coordinate it with input values that I consider to be sets for space-time travel based on the experiment that we're doing today. Okay, so given that, and again, like one of the reasons that I wanted to problematize the potential variations of naming me, this Bruce Stater person, is because because we're using this particular figuration of this sometimes what's considered a stability, right? That the ego is a form of stabilizing the persona, but we're using it here not as a definition of who that I is or what that I's personality is, but merely as a space-time loci, right? And then the argument is, it has to be multiple because space and time are always multiple. And then we discussed, or I provided examples in which that's the case. That both are part of the familiar way of locating in space-time, and that one can imagine extending those ways of locating in space-time if one were to wanting to get more specific. So for example, longitude, latitude, and then we have zaptitude, and then we would add to that chronitude, and chronitude would not only reference a specific time, say, would not only reference, say, 10:31 a.m. on Monday, July 20th, but it would also reference the expansion or contraction of a time locus, right? So it would tell you whether T0 was going to be 1 second, or T0 was going to be eternity, or T0 was going to be an hour and a half, right? All right, so having said that, let's take a look at what's on the page today. All right, so I just first of all, let's just I'm not going to use okay, let's see how well this is once again, this is Jerome Rothenberg's Poems and Poetics blog, and I use it because this is one of the coordinates. Here's the name that we're using, and this is one of the coordinates. So if I were going to use it on this page, and I will later, but I would go over here and I would see what intersects. All right, so let's try this. I usually hyphenate this term, but I'm not going to hyphenate it here. Oops. I'm not going to hyphenate it here because I doubt that I'll get any results. But let's try space-time travel just to see if there are any, in fact, any results. Now, again, like the openness to improvisation is a big part of this because the universe offers certain paths in space-time travel, right? So you look for these singularities, these portals, and you can design a portal, and you can but you won't be able to use that portal unless you're in some ways open to the experience of where the portal decides that you need to go. So this is one of the problems with the ego. Okay, so when I performed my piece in my flight jacket, my blue flight jacket, 1969, sometime in May, at the end of my first year of public school in kindergarten, and I had brought these donut holes, and I was performing in my astronaut suit. This for me was an astronaut suit, and I had mentioned yesterday that I may or may not have had a little patch on the flight jacket that said NASA. Okay, but it was misrecognized. My performance was misrecognized by my fellow students, who laughed at me, and I felt humiliated, and they said I was wearing pajamas. Right? Well, whatever was going on, I certainly could have responded to the contingencies of that particular moment, right? I could have elaborated, I could have engaged, discursively, the distinction between pajamas and a flight suit or flight jacket. I could have found ways, of convincing or performing that particular role. But instead, what happened was I took a different route, and I invested in this particular idea of ego that I was hurt, or I was being injured by this misinterpretation of my performance, and so the improvisation, really got derailed, and that was the example of failure. And I had suggested, yesterday that Bezos and Ransom competing to be the first billionaire in space was, very sort of contrived and referenced in a number of ways. The age of discovery, these heroes who pretend that from this particular space-time locus that they come from, that since they don't know this thing, that no one else knows this thing. So for example, right, discovery, what does it mean? What does it mean to discover a people who already exist? Well, they know they exist, so they're not being discovered, but you're so egocentric that you can only see it from your perspective, right? But that's like the premise, right? You're looking from this like ego-based premise in which all others are always others, and so those others never have like the claim to say that they are, because they haven't been flagged yet. You haven't planted the flag on them, and so they haven't been discovered. So this is this like delusion that this particular like egocentricity performs. And the illusion is, the egocentricity is from the individual space, from the individual positionality. So the individual space is the person, the positionality is whatever marks that positionality as universal, white male subject, property owning white male subject in particular, and then what other universals mark that particular space could involve the trajectory of the travel and other things as well. Anyway, so I forget why I got sidetracked on that, but anyway, space-time travel. Let's see when it gets this. All right, that's not a surprise. Amy Catanzano, excerpt from Quantum Poetics, Writing the Speed of Light, Part 1. And then I'll use that name as the other data set that gives us a coordinate. And we're just going to bring those two data sets together on this particular two-dimensional surface. So we're going to find a line on this surface that brings these two data sets together. Okay, so that's my data set right there. All right, and I'll begin with at the top of the sentence, but we're going to focus on that little blue part, right? Let's see who he is. I think this is Einstein. So he is Einstein, and Einstein has come into my work a lot before for a number of different reasons, but for now we're just going to accept what's here. Einstein asked, "How would the world look to someone sitting astride a beam of light?" Schlein notes that Picasso, through Cubism, and Einstein, through relativity, imagined that all points in space along a path of observation. Okay, so all points in space along a path of observation. So there's this. So observing, can be a number of different things. We associate it with the eye, which is a pun on I, the first person singular. But that alignment, that pun is hardly a pun at all, because often the eye is seen as this point of observation, like I was talking about with these heroes of the age of discovery, and how they're being, sort of mimetically reproduced by Bezos and Ransom in these acts of exploring the universe with these resources that they have, and turning it into a competition, like who's the fastest billionaire, who can move these resources around, and for apparently no purpose whatsoever, wins the game. Imagine, okay, so. And Einstein, through relativity, imagined that all points in space along a path of observation. But I was saying, observation is associated with the eye, but it needn't be the eye. Hearing is also a form of observation. Feeling is an observation. Even empathy is an observation. It is. It's not merely a feeling that arises from a set of informational data. It is an experience of the world. That brings about a proximity of one's experience to another's experience, and this is very much a data set of the observation of phenomena, right? Because emotion is a phenomena, and the feeling of the emotion is the perception of that phenomena, even though it's an inner perception, but it's perception nevertheless. So it's a form of knowledge, right? And this is one of the things that I've argued, that performativity can grant one in a certain kind of performance artwork, and hence its value as a learning and instructive gesture, as well as creative gesture. So path of observation, occupy the same location simultaneously. Okay, so occupying the same location simultaneously is in some way what we're doing right here, because I'm bringing this one who moves around depending on what values you plug into the search engine, right? And depending on what values, which I'm calling a data set, so space-time travel is itself a data set, just like this name is a data set, and then this is a further data set. So this name can grant us a location here. But as I said, names are multiversal the same way that space and time are. So I have more than one location for this name. Now this name could be this could be the subtitle of this particular locus point. The locus point is titled Bruce Stater. And then the subtitle for this locus point is From Outside the House, the Book of the Wilderness of Paper, Fire, and Clay. So let's go back over here. And then this is one name. This is one, and again, we're exploring this, different way of using the I instead of as a psychic phenomenon and a kind of enclosure, right, of personality. We're using it as a data set. So I was reading the Einstein. Through relativity, Einstein imagined that all points in space along a path of observation occupy the same location simultaneously. In his theory of general relativity, Einstein illustrated how the world would look to someone with access to multiple and all perspectives at the same time. All right, anyway, so that seems relevant enough. And then, as I was saying, I have a few of my... there are a few of these Bruce Staters on this site. So this is one Bruce Stater, and then this from outside the house, could be seen as a subset of Bruce Stater. So let's see if we can find another one, and let's see. All right, there's another one. All right, there's another one of these loci, and as I mentioned, this name is performing on this two-dimensional space in the same way that that I want other examples of data sets to perform, and have polyvalent, resonances as they, cross space and time. So this is a subset, perhaps, of this term. Again, so we're looking at the Empire State Building, but then we're looking at it not only as it exists in two-dimensional space, but we're looking at it in some way as it, exists across time. Here we have the timestamps. So this gives you the Empire State Building at a certain time. And that analogy should be somewhat helpful. We'll do the same thing. We'll coordinate those two things as if they exist in the same space-time. And we get, well, that's interesting. I just said that. We'll coordinate these two items as if they exist in the same space-time. And what we get is the sentence, while the viewer sees different angles or sides of the object at the same time on the canvas, they remain stationary, reversing a more typical experience with sculpture in three-dimensional space where a viewer must move around an object to see all or most of its angles or sides. Now, angles is really interesting because I often use the angle of light as a space-time coordinating vector. And on the front page of my site, you'll see that right now that I'm using, and I talk about the angles theta, right? I talk about these theta as angles of light, and because it's light, it always is involved in both travel and in time, and so angles of light are a way of coordinating space-time for me, and that's right on the front page today. So it's, again, with a kind of coordinated synchronicity that we find these two statements. While the viewer sees different angles or sides of the object at the same time of the canvas, they remain stationary, reversing a more typical experience with sculpture in three-dimensional space where a viewer must move around an object to see all or most of its angles or sides. So what I want to do, I won't find, there are a few other examples where we can, coordinate these, but I think this is enough. And what I want to do with this is tie it to what's on the front page at this particular moment in space-time, which, if I recall correctly, is a piece that refers to the angels of fire, or angel of fire. An angel and angle, or angels and angles, are almost the same word. You just have to move the E, in one direction or another. So if you look at this word, L, right? If you're moving from right to left, L, and if you move the E here in front of the G in front of the L and behind the G, then you'll have angels. So this, in a way, ties us. I mean, if you allow me that move, that anagrammatical move, that we can go back up and have another experience of what's on the front page. So to get to the front page, all I have to do is hit this title. All right, yeah, 6 poems from Angel of Fire. So maybe Angle of Fire. So Angle of Light, Angel of Fire, very similar. And then, this term, depending on, where you take it, but reminding me of Uriel in a certain way, Angel of Light or the Angel of Fire. And let me use the same coordinate because we're exploring that coordinate. I'm not just being egocentric and narcissistic using my name at this point, although, I'm not completely averse to playing the role of narcissist and egocentric individual, but for the time being, we're just using this as a coordinate, and I'm not particularly ego invested in that other way regarding the results of the space-time travel experiment, right? And this is because we're exploring this as a way of breaking out of that egocentricism from the point of view of positionality, and to explore the positionality from the point of view of the multiverse, rather than these sort of vectors of privilege and vectors of power and other vectors, right? So there's a political rationale for what we're doing and why we explore space and time in these ways, and why we challenge egocentricism in the concentric circles. Oh, here's an example of that. All right, remember, everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of you will have read James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. And you'll remember when Stephen Dedalus writes in the book, his name, and then, where he lives, and then, what city that is in, and it goes on, and he lives in Ireland, and then it's the Earth, and then from that, the universe. So, it's this designation of this kind of egocentric understanding of identity, as you could say, expanding out, in these concentric circles of belonging, and it's really adorable. But in a certain way, what I'm doing is a challenge to those kinds of sort of unidimensional understandings of positions. And so, let's see where this brings us. Looks like what we get is this number. All right, now that I have to make a decision about how I'm going to utilize this number. All right, so let's take 12, Roman numeral 12, as the set, as the space-time coordinate set, and let's replug it into another machine. All right, so you can see the connection there. I've got a phone call, so I'll be right back. All right, so that phone call that I had characterized as an interruption, actually in a certain way related semantically to what we're doing today. It was a phone call from my wife, Lori, and in this particular moment, she is also engaged in an act of space travel. She's traveling from Julian, California, back to where I am in Nashchiti, New Mexico, and she had given me some updates on her progress on that travel. So, in any case, where we were was I was looking at this particular intersection of this number with this coordinate, and I'm going to use this number, this Roman numeral 12, but I need to, in order to use this in the way that I want to use it, I need to have two sets of numerical values. The first set not exceeding approximately 330, and the second set just being a reasonably countable number. But to acquire a set of two numbers, I can see that there are at least two ways that I can do that with this figure. The ones that stand out to me are I can divide it between the 10 and the 2, and then I would have 10 and then comma 2, and I could also create an 11 out of that and have a 1. So I have 10 and 2 and 11 and 1, and I'm going to use both of those values, and then I want to combine those values. I'm going to combine the semantics of those values as we work them out and see what they give me. So I want to plug them into the data set that I've used before, which is my iTunes list. So if you've been following our space-time travel explorations, you kind of know how this works. We ignore the genius. We can start here with this set. This is a set of sets. So each of these sets contain multiple playlists. So we'll start here, and as I said before, I do have trouble with counting, but because our numbers 10 and 11 are smaller than 40, we'll have to count those out individually. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And my number for this set was 10 and 2, so that's Fugazi. And 10 and 2 gets us to the semantic value repeater. And I had mentioned that I wanted to use this coordinate and combine it with another coordinate. So we've moved in space and time a number of different ways. So you could consider this as like time jumping or leaping. You could use the metaphor of leapfrog or hopfrog. And we're jumping, right, using the coordinates as sort of skipping stones to jump across these semantic and semiotic vectors. So the first one, let's just call this a semiotic value, and this can be, we could do a lot with this. We could create an anagram out of this. We could break it up right here. You have eater and you have rep. That could be representation or Republican. This could be rate, right? Anyway, so there's a lot that we could do with that. Let's just remember that it's repeater for the time being, and then jump down to the next set. So the next set it's X1, XII, so 10, 2, and 11, 1. So this one is okay. So my eyes, my heart. So what I like about this is that it already repeats. So what repeats here is my and my. And I'm not going to transform the first set into an anagram, or I'm not going to look at what can be made out of this in terms of an acronym I'm just going to look at what the two semiotic domains, give rise to, sort of in an almost obvious manner, at least to me. So repeater, and then you have the my and the my. So I'm going to take the my and the my as the example of the repetition, and I'm going to plug that back into this space-time travel device and see where we go from there. All right. So I can see where the my's are here. There's the my's. All right. Hiromi Ito, and this is from Coyote. Oh, this is interesting. Remember we already had a reference to angles and angles of light, and then I had made a comment on how angles and angels are in fact anagrams, for one another, and I had, briefly discussed that connection. So this is the name of the translator and commentator on this piece, and that's kind of interesting. And then let's see, using that other coordinate, what we get. Did I go too far? There's the coordinate. All right, so that's the first set. Okay, that's really interesting. The women sit together and begin to speak in baby talk. Gayate, Gayate, Hara Gayate, Hara Gayate. Now, okay, that looks pretty familiar, sort of vaguely familiar. I think it's a chant of the Heart Sutra, but I'm gonna need to find out. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna copy that. Again, if I were to try to transcribe that into a search, in Google, I would have a hard time because of my dysgraphia, getting these letters all in sequence. So what I've done is I've copied it. I'm going to copy and paste it. All right, so let's go back. I'm creating a new window, and we're going to paste that in there. I think I think I can derive the Heart Sutra from this, but I'm not sure. All right, so what I need to do is I need to get rid of some of these A's because I need to take the baby talk out. So the significance of removing A's is, oh, look, it's already giving me a suggestion. The significance of removing A's is already interesting. Okay, here's something. Oh, it is from the Heart Sutra, so I was right about that. All right, so let's take a look and see if we can get any closer. I can't really find anything useful there. Let's try. Let's try translation. Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, here we go. Heart Sutra. Oh, very nice. All right, so here we go. So here is exactly what we're looking for, and I was right. It comes from the Heart Sutra, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. Probably not. Gayate, Gayate, Gan, Gayate. Let's see. Hara Gayate, Hara So Gayate. Gone to the other shore, gone completely to the other shore. So, let's see. Haragayate. Now in this translation, the translations can be tricky, and it's not a unit by unit translation. So, Gayate either means gone to the other shore, or gone, completely gone. And I'm not sure which it means, but in either case, whether I think, as I'm not a good linguist, but I'm a good enough linguist to know that if the translation is gone, and the Gayate is repeated, gone to the other shore, gone to the other shore, gone, completely gone, that the Gayate is the gone. So we know that we have gone, and we have it twice, Gayate and Hara Gayate. Now the Hara either represents this notion of the other shore or completely. And I imagine that the other shore is rather this thing over here, right? And the Hara Gayate is the completely. So completely gone. But I could be wrong. I mean, this could be the completely, and it does say the other shore twice. So this is either a bad translation, or it's really the completely that is. Let's see if we can get closer to a good translation, but I don't know that we really can. So I'm going to take this again. We may already have this. I don't even know that we need to come to a better translation, but or at least a more linguistically transparent translation. I shouldn't say that it's bad, it's just that it's not entirely linguistically transparent. So we know that the Gayate is gone, so gone somewhere, and then either to the other shore or completely gone. But as a Buddhist notion, this suggests like a relationship to not only travel or leaving or to the other shore, but like what that metaphor means. So again, a different realm, transcendent, to perhaps to this realm, the perfection of transcendent wisdom. The play that we were engaged in this particular form of space-time travel with this position, this loci, based in the name and all of the dimensionalities of that name and its relationship to ego, suggests a kind of moving from a singular point to the other side, the other shore. The ego passes into nirvana or satori perhaps, or merely disappears and goes elsewhere. It's engaged in the process of moving. So this very much, plays into the construction of this particular space-time travel machine, if we allow it to. Let me see if I can come back up and So we're trying to figure out if this means gone to the other shore, or gone, completely gone. Okay, we already know what this means. We know that this means gone. We're looking for what this means. Oh, you know what? All I have to do is really do this. Sometimes, well, here's the thing on the Heart Sutra. Let's see if we get anywhere. Sometimes the listings promise you something, but they don't give you what they promise, as you're well aware. No result. See, so here's an example of something that was promised, and of course, you know, there's no result. There's ads, right? Sort of like offensive ads, but there's not what we want. I wondered about that. All right, so let's see if there's a different translation of the Heart Sutra under the Wikipedia entry. Even though the data in the other set suggested that it's gone to the other side, for some reason the shape, the morphological shape of this particular unit kind of strikes me as having more potential as being completely gone. Oh, here we go. Literally, the original in Sanskrit, and we're skipping the Japanese, but the original in Sanskrit is gone beyond. Okay, so whatever the translation was, and gone to the other shore, it's a very sort of poetic image, right? You know, much more poetic in Japanese, but the original is gone beyond. Now, gone beyond, one can hardly ignore that the relationship between the semiotic unit gone beyond and the explorations of our space travel, because the space-time travel is all about going beyond, right? I mean, even Bezos and Ransom want to go beyond, and we're attempting to go beyond the limits of the failures of their space-time travel machines. So gone utterly beyond is I want to call this our destination. And I like the idea of gone beyond, gone utterly beyond as a destination, because what does that even mean? So if you recall, when I described the first space travel machine that I invented, it wasn't a time travel machine, but it was a space travel machine. And the way that it worked was it projected itself by transforming itself. The craft would transform itself from whatever matter that it was made from, and the matter of its contents, into light, and this light it would project, you know, into the space beyond. So at some point, you know, this would be directed toward a location, but the idea of the projector and projecting beyond suggests that, and the way that I've plugged these values back into the system, and we're going to call this the destination, the end point. But in a sense, the end point already points to or suggests that that even the destination is merely provisional, right? And that it's the going beyond that is the destination, not any specific space-time location. So that having arrived at that conclusion, I think we can allow ourselves to say this final part: enlightenment hail.